you very much for coming. You can hear me well enough. Is that okay for everybody? You can see me, hear me? Yeah. Great. My name's Jon Tweed, if you weren't with us last week. Last week we talked about we're looking at pretty some of the stoppages, and I think that's pretty why it's in the process at the moment. And there's been a lot of work with the council, and Peter Barton came and talked last week about the legal side. This week there's a heck of a lot going on the valuation process, as we're all aware. So I think very important we look at what's going on a daily basis. I think what we've done, we've brought Neil McKenzie, who's from Hodge, senior property surveyor, and Neil's going to do there's a couple of questions I'm going to ask Neil, and what I'd like is, as we go along, if there's any questions, please use web chat. As you say, if we could all mute, apart from the three of us who are going to talk, it'd be a way to do it. There'll be time then, we'll ask the questions at the end, if that's okay. So that's it, so we'll get going. So Neil, let's start talking about the valuation. We've all been used to this market. I've been involved in this market for 25 years, and we're used to physical valuations. Now all of a sudden we're talking about remote valuation. So just perhaps for me and perhaps some of the others, just give us an idea, if you would. What's the difference between AVMs and desktops? Because there's been a bit of talk about both, and if you could just explain that for us, would be great.
Hi, John. Yeah, sure. These are both termed remote valuations, and I think that's where some of the confusion comes about. Really, the remote valuation point is that a surveyor is not inspecting the property. So the AVM is a computerized model. It stands for Automated Valuation Model. So it's a computerized model which you put in the address of the property and some basic details on it, and it will then give you an answer of what it believes the valuation of that property is, and a certainty level in respect of that valuation. So these have been used by quite a number of lenders for a period of time now, and they'll determine whether they'll use them on what LTVs based upon the certainty levels of the AVMs. But ultimately, it is purely a computer sequenced system based upon the data which is held in that computer system.
So and to be clear, in our industry at the moment, we are going down the desktop route.
A lot of lenders are looking for the desktop route because that's got an involvement from a surveyor which reviews the data available to them to come to a valuation. Okay, so
as we move from this then, and again, I think this is important, and particularly when we move on, start looking at particular processes with each lender who are bringing these new processes in. So what extra requirements would a valuer be looking at when they're looking at desktop as opposed to physical? What's the difference in practice, I suppose, is what I'd like to know.
Sure. Well, the desktop is obviously done from a remote point of view, and so the first point is really looking for a digital footprint. So what they mean by that is the valuer's got to have enough data available to them to be able to come to a conclusion of what the property is, what the physical attributes of the property is, what the location is, what they're trying to value, and enough data to be able to arrive at the sort of valuation on that with a level of confidence. So they'll be looking at things like Rightmove, the surveyor's comparable to part of Rightmove, land registry, street view, aerial photographs, the values of databases, just really everything they can pull in to get the valuer to a level of comfort, which they're happy to place a value on that property on the parameters of a desktop. They've actually, some of the limitations of it really from a valuation point of view is that if there's not a digital footprint, so if a property hasn't been sold for several years, there's been no actual valuation on it in the past, there's nothing showing on the systems, then it's very difficult to come to a conclusion what that property is with any level of certainty to do a valuation. The comparables will be another factor. If it's in a town or city, then they're probably readily available with a similar type of property. If it's more rural, then they'll be more difficult to compare like with like. And in those circumstances, you really want to get the confidence of what it is. But there's a whole list of properties which are not suitable for a desktop, and many of the restrictions on the desktops are actually from the valuer perspective. You've obviously got restrictions from a lender perspective.
Yeah, okay.
what they'll accept.
So do you know, a very good leading on from that. Paul, I hope you don't mind me bringing your question up, because it's a very good question for Paul Myers. And we talked about this, Neil. A lot of Equities customers have been in the property a long time. Presumably this will affect desktop value.
It makes it more difficult if there's no data on that property. If it's not been valued, it's not been on the market, there's no photographs available of it. If all you can get is a street view, which could have been done a few years ago, then it's very difficult to establish what that property is with any confidence to be able to value it.
Yeah. So does that lead on to a bigger issue then with comparables? You know,
there is an issue of comparables, and obviously in the market at the moment, there's very, very few transactions happening. So the comparables, the valuers are relying on all pre-COVID-19. So there's a certainty statement clause which is in all valuations today, and that's come through the RICS guidance.
Yeah.
There is really no market at the moment of any level which anybody can actually establish what the value is today. Mm-hmm. So all these comparables are based upon, and the valuations are based on transactions which are pre the lockdown period.
Right, and that's what they will be using, you think, at the moment, or is that what is where it'll go? Or
they've really got no choice but to use those. I would expect the valuers to look at those, and you may have some outliers and high-level ones on individual properties, but they're going to look for the general pattern, the general tone in that location, and look at what a number of transactions are showing to support that valuation.
Yeah.
And that's the best the valuers can do at the moment. Nobody can predict where the market is today or where the market's going to be when we come out of this.
Yeah, true. So, okay, crystal ball time. So we're starting down the road of using desktops, and I know that'll, you know, we'll see where it goes in practice. But it's great. Lenders are putting a lot of work into that, and you know, which is great news to keep the market moving. So, in your view, do you think desktops will become a norm in this market in particular? You know, I'm talking the lifetime mortgage, later life.
I don't think when we come out of this situation that they will become the norm. AVMs and desktops have been available to lenders and have been used by lenders for certain product ranges. But in the lifetime market, the physical condition of the property is paramount in terms of how that property is going to perform in the long term. And so it's a function of the market today that lenders are looking to try and progress cases, and therefore the only options they've really got are desktop or AVMs.
Right.
But they will revert to physical valuations because that is the preferential level of inspection for this type of market.
Yeah. So, you know, I've got another question just quickly from Roger. I had a case yesterday, LTV 33%. Lender could not get desktop valuation. Roger, I'm not sure why. It was a case on hold until physical valuation. I'm assuming we're going to have those particular ones where it's, again, it goes back to property maybe not being suitable. Or?
Yeah, from the valuation point of view, it's not the valuer's concern is not the LTV. The valuer's concern is the certainty level they can get in terms of the data they've got on that property.
Yeah.
You've got certain types of properties which wouldn't be suitable, and many of the valuation companies wouldn't accept the valuation on. You've got things like listed buildings, properties over 1850. Some of them are restrictive on flats, leaseholds on shorter leases, something which is non-standard construction, flying freeholds next to commercial properties. There's a whole list of them where there could be factors which the valuers are not able to fully appraise from a desktop, and so those would fall out of that parameter.
And I think again it comes in, Paul has commented here that standard construction, immaculate bungalow, not valuation decline to not enough data. So as you're saying there, Neil, there's various. And perhaps we're still finding our way around this process. Or yeah, I know you can't answer for another lender. I know that anyway, but
I think that the surveyors are quite comfortable with desktop valuations. As I say, they've been used, and there's data there, but it's really what data is available on that individual property. And if it's in a rural location, there's not been many transactions in that area, and there's not a lot of history on that property, then it makes it very difficult to come to a valuation of it.
Okay. Okay. Another question here. Well, another two. We'll do two more, and then I'll let you die. And I must admit, from Neil's viewpoint, he's done a fantastic job for us because even though Neil's got huge experience in the market, he's actually been with Hodge for 2 weeks, so we threw him in right into the deep end, even though his experience overall is better than most. So we do thank you on that, Neil. So just quickly, would Bob's asked a question? Would drive-bys be contrary to current restrictions? I'm not sure what the answer is to that, but.
I think the question is then, is that essential journey? Most of the valuation companies are taking the view it's not an essential journey, so drive-bys are not generally available at the moment.
Yeah. And I think there's one more question before we finish on this. Have you considered liaising with clients who could set up a link to a smartphone to show a survey around the property? Now, I know, Jane, when you talk about some of the lenders, there are some requiring internal pictures, etc. So, yeah, and again, Neil, that might not be one you could answer, but I think all things like that will perhaps be looked at as we develop. It's a very, I suppose, young and immature process for us at the moment from what we're used to in the lifetime mortgage world, and I think it's getting comfort and confidence within that. Well, that's what I'd suggest. But,
yeah, the valuation companies are coming up with new ideas all the time and trying to get something which is closer to a physical inspection, and some of them are coming up with this sort of ideas about having live feed videos and things. But and that's going to develop over the next few weeks and months, I'm sure.
Yeah. And just one from Richard. This is the last one we'll do. Why isn't it possible to use data and drive by the property if there's a concern? And if further concern, then there's a question about ask the operator to use a camera. Well, that is one I think we're considering. And as you said, Richard, solicitors are still visiting. And I think that's down to, from we looked at the legals last week about home visits and what we could do remotely, etc. And again, I'm assuming from a valuation viewpoint that comes down to, that's their own policies. The actual physical valuation.
Also, a drive-by doesn't give you a hell of a lot more than a desktop. It gives you an up-to-date view of the exterior of it, but it doesn't give you any real detail about the physical condition of the property internally.
Right. Okay. So, Neil, thank you very much. We've given you've answered a good few questions for us there. Really appreciated. The second part, what I want to do now is put over to Jane. I think many of you know Jane Hanlon. She runs our mortgage help desk and the help desk team. To me, she's got an encyclopedic knowledge of criteria in the industry. A lot of you know her and have worked with her in the past, and hopefully you're working with her here now. So, Jane, the second, I think really what's important, and as you say, even from we saw one family have gone live with changes today, it's a constantly moving feast of data at the moment. And I think, I think the important thing is, from our viewpoint, is to make sure you're registered with us. And Jane here as an absolute expert, I'm comfortable saying that, I'm very confident saying that. And also, I think make sure you're registered with our live feed. We do make sure that is very much up to date. Being live is the active word there. So, Jane, if I hand over to you, you're going to talk about the various lenders and where we are. And as you say, this is as of today, and I'm sure as of tomorrow that will change. So again, the important thing is, I think, make sure you're registered with us. And I'll talk to you at the end briefly about where we are and what we're doing next. But over to you, Jane.
Okay, good morning. Well, I'm Jane. Yes, I'm the face now. You can actually see me. And as per Parliament requirements, I have dressed accordingly.
Very smart.
So yes, I'm not normally in the front line. I'm normally on the end of the phone on the help desk. So yeah, as you know, many of you know me. Right, off we go then. So the last 4 to 5 weeks, I think, has been a bit of a roller coaster. But more importantly, the last 2 weeks, we've seen rate rises, LTVs drops, products withdrawn, priced out in the market, lenders coping with the pipeline. But the good news is, and the really good news is, we're still lending. And we're now seeing the introduction of automated valuations and desktops, whatever you want to call them. So I'm going to just run you through
desktops, Jim.
Desktops, okay. I'll call you through, go through the lenders and the differences, because quite a lot have changed, whether it be temporarily, we hope not, but there has been some changes in the style of lending. I'll start off with Legal and General first, because they had a slightly different approach, and they were one of the first to actually come in with the desktop valuations. And their approach is to take the 95% of the property value when using. So you will now require a minimum valuation of 105,264, which 95% of that is 100,000. They will then base their lending on that 95%. The good news as well is the maximum property value is 2 million, unlike many others. They have restricted the acreage to below 5 acres now, and they're no longer doing flats. They do have a short property questionnaire, and they will require a physical valuation at such time. But I think the good news is the lenders are open for business. Just Retirement, their desktop property valuation has come in. They have changed the minimum property valuation to 100,000 from 70. So it's worth noting, and the maximum properties are 750 outside the M25, 1 million inside. On the J1 and J2 range, some of you have used, there is no reduction on the loan to values. However, they're no longer lending in Northern Ireland. For J3 and J5, what they've done is a slightly different approach to Legal and General by taking a 10% reduction. So if you're borrowing the maximum, and say the maximum is 100,000, they would then only lend you 90,000. Until such time they could do a physical valuation, and then if the 10% was available from the valuation, a cash facility would be available to the client, which they could draw at the prevailing rate at the time. So that's important. It's not a retention, it's a reduction. They do have a property questionnaire, and they do require digital photos of most of the main rooms. So that is actually worth remembering, because your clients obviously got to take some photos. And again, you come up with technology for the older age group. Aviva, they are moving to desktop. They've given us the minimums and maximums, but we have little other information at this moment in time, but they are moving in that direction. So we welcome their criteria and hoping to get it soon, to be honest with you, because I know it's well on its way. Hodge, automatic valuation desktops, they've got the semi and the lump sum range at the moment. It's very much a like-for-like case, which means if you've got a £100,000 mortgage, then they would replace that with a 100,000 lifetime mortgage. So you can see they're all different. Canada Life, they're going to desktop with the lifestyle range. Now this is quite important because it is just the lifestyle range. The minimum valuation is 70. So they've continued to run at 70 valuation. The lease, however, has been increased to over 100 years. I think the good things with Canada Life is if you are married and you want to proceed in a single name, then the spouse can sign a waiver of occupancy, and that has been retained. Capital Choice, they're working with the funders. More to Life, they've got quite a range here, but with the maximum choice, they've done a 10% reduction. So your 100,000 becomes 90,000 until such time there's a valuation. Pure Choice, they've removed the plus range. So they've gone to lower loan to values. They don't apply a retention or a reduction, but they do require a physical valuation. Capital Choice, the changes came in recently. The minimum valuation on this property now is 150,000. So you can see there's some quite changes between the lenders. No ex-local authority properties, and they've applied a reduction as well. On the maximum range, the applied 10%, so your 100,000 becomes 90,000, and on the plus range, your 100,000 becomes 75,000 as they've applied a 25% reduction. It's really important to note here that they've permanently removed from the age-restricted property market on that product. Tailored Choice, most of you know that for medical, they just require photos in questionnaire and do require physical valuation at the time it's available. We're rattling through the lenders now, just a few more to go. Liverpool Victoria Desktop, they require a questionnaire with the KFI, which is quite different to the procedures of the other lenders. Their valuation has been increased to 150,000 for the minimum. No longer doing ex-local, age restricted, and second homes. However, if they can't do a desktop, the pipeline business, and in their words, I'll quote it, guaranteed interest rate for 6 months from the point of the application is processed pending physical. So you've got a 6-month window. One family they announced yesterday, they call it stay-at-home policy, which I quite like. Their application no longer requires a wet signature. Interestingly enough, their maximum property values are slightly higher than most, with £1 million standard and 1.5 within the M25. So that allows a little bit more scope, because we are seeing lots of property on the higher end of the market looking to raise funds. On the light range, they've done a reduction again of 10%, so your 100,000 becomes 90. On the standard and super schemes, they've applied a 15% reduction, so your 100,000 now becomes 85. The maximum release is then released after the site valuation. Unfortunately, they've had to pull out of age restricted. However, they will look at new builds if it's over 2 years. A lot of the other lenders have specified 2017, so that's 2.5. So there's a little bit of a window there. The downside is they've actually said for married, cohabiting and civil partnerships, the application is now required in joint names. However, for anyone that's got an existing mortgage with them, for porting or additional funds, this is unaffected, so it can still proceed in a single name. Pure, the last lender, they've got the Heritage and Sovereign. They've revamped these products in the last few days, increasing the rates, unfortunately, and lowering the values. However, there's no haircut. A physical valuation is required. And again, I get you to note that if you're using a drawdown facility with Pure on these products, it will not be available until a physical valuation is completed. And we don't know how long that could be. That could be a year. So you have to bear that in mind. So take that into account. For those lucky enough to qualify for the classic range is a restricted product for a few, which we're hoping to open to the full market in time, and we're working on it, I can assure you John is. They've lowered the loan to values, and just working on the light range, they've set a minimum valuation again of 150,000. So there's no haircut, and interestingly enough, they're the only ones to say no further physical site visit. However, internal photographs of the property are required. So the overview really is property valuations. For those at the lower end, there's a restricted number of lenders. We'll look at it. 70, 75, a lot of them going in at 100, 150, and at the top end, we're looking at 750,000 for outside the M25. There's only a few lenders that will lend to properties a little bit higher than that. Flats are also an issue with most lenders. We have got one or two that consider it, but there are certain terms and conditions. Standard properties are normally the ones that you're looking for. 1850s to 2017 is the sort of banding. No flat roofs, no large extensions and things like that. So what we've seen is obviously the higher the loan to values, the reduction in the number of products that are available. Various adjustments to that end of the market as well, reducing the reductions or reducing the lending. So I was having a conversation with Steve, one of my specialist brokers, and we were talking about fact finds and things in general in the current market. And whereas before you could just get the name, dates of birth, property value, and perhaps the address, and think, right, we'll start working on this. I think we now need to ask more about property, more information about the property, the age of the property, location, anything unusual. So that you can actually prepare clients, because they may have to wait. Desktop may not be available for them. So you don't want to lose your client, but you do need to prepare them So I do think that perhaps should come earlier in the fact find process now, whereas perhaps in the past it would be towards the end. So people are working differently. We're working differently. I'm working more remotely now, speaking to you over a webcam. Anyway, so I thank you for your time, and I'm going to pass you back to Jon now.
Thanks, Jane. Well, hopefully everybody that was, there's a lot of information there. So again, what I suggest, Jane is there and the team are there to help as much as we possibly can. And Jane, you're very busy at the moment. I'm talking, actually looking at switching plans as well.
Yeah, we're looking at rebroking because stuff is, caught in the pipeline. Lenders not making decisions, clients needing money.
So
yeah, it's actually very busy. It's unbelievably busy. I just can't, it's a surprise, to be honest with you, how busy it is. And so I think it's going to get busier.
So if there's any, if you want any discussions with us or with Jane on, on the pipeline and rebroking, please let us know. And as you say, Jane, I think the top tip for now is make sure you get as much information on property. But again, I'd go back, utilize Jane's knowledge. For those who know her, I think many of you do anyway. But we are there to help, and we'd love to help as much as we possibly can. I think on the other side, then on our platform side, with AdviceWise, you're probably aware if you are registered, but if not, it's worth registering because there's no downside. We do have the desktop and retention filters that you can actually make sure you can see the lenders. We're only showing the lenders that are relevant to you. And as Jane said, some are doing the retentions. They will do physical valuations in the future. One more question, and Neil, this is for you from Don. And I'm not sure if you'll do this again. Coming in 2 weeks, you're probably still finding your way with some of it. Will Hodge still do day one downsizing without ERC? That might be one more for the BDMs, but Don, we can find that out for you. Neil, you're probably not aware of that.
Probably for the BDMs at the moment.
Yeah. So Don, we will come back to you on that one. And if funds are to be used to extend the property, can desktop valuations be conducted on the architect's plans?
That comes down to the valuers really, in terms of what information they believe they can get, in terms of what it is currently and what it's going to be.
Right. Okay. Don, we will come back to you on that one. We've made a note, and we will come back. So thank you everybody for attending again. This was, as you say, the second of our program of events. Hopefully it was of use. It is there. It's, as you say, it's a moving feast. We know that things are changing constantly. And as hopefully, fingers crossed, sooner rather than later, we start coming out of these times. Things are going to keep constantly changing. That we'll move back to probably physical valuations. Neil, I think you'd agree desktops aren't probably going to be the norm in this market, but that's to be seen, I suppose. I think as we all move, I think we will be moving more to remote digital working, and this could remain. Make sure you're registered. Just use Jane. That's the tip for me. Next week we are going to be. I'm going to be interviewing Jim Boyd, Chief Executive of the Actuaries Council. So that should be a good one. Just finding out what their thoughts are, what they're up to, where they are. We've seen the latest figures come out, and yes, that's probably going to change for the next quarter. But we will be sending that invite out fairly soon. So please join us next week for 11 o'clock. I think that'll be an interesting one as well. I'd like to thank Jane and Neil, and thank you everybody for attending. We really do appreciate it. And it's been great having you all on board.
Thanks, John.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.